quickly want to go to our senior White House correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, the president is back from Asia, delivered a speech just a little while ago, but he's keeping very, very quiet about the entire Ray Moore scandal.
Wolf, he is indeed. He, of course, is watching all of this very carefully because the balance of power in the Senate potentially hangs on this. But he has decided not to weigh in today, even though some of his Republicans here in this town would like him to. But, Wolf, I can promise you that he is watching this news conference here as well. And this is something that all Republicans in town are eager to have the president's voice on this. Senator Lindsey Graham said earlier he hopes the president, as the leader of the party, weighs in. So let's watch as this unfolds right here in front of us, Wolf, of course, in Birmingham, Alabama. All the Senate Republicans now watching this race, Wolf.
Here we go. Here's the attorney for Ray Moore.
Today. As you know, Judge Moore has been falsely accused of some things that he did not do 40 years ago. This is a campaign, so you can expect most anything to come out, but, you know, we can't just stand by idly and let false charges go without some answering. We've had a lot of people tell us different things about some of these stories, and we're checking them all out. But one thing I can tell you is we do have some information that we're going to share with you today, and we know that you're going to share it with those folks that you're communicating with about some of these charges. I am Bill Armistead, chairman of the campaign for Judge Moore, and I want to introduce to you Philip Jareggi, who coincidentally was chairman of Judge Moore's campaign for Chief Justice back in 2000.
That's right.
He's an attorney, and he is representing us in this case, and I'd like now to turn this over to Mr. Jareggi, and he'll make some comments.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Phil.
Appreciate y'all being here today. This is very important. Of course, there have been some serious allegations, and we really appreciate the media and what you guys do to help get the word out and spread the truth. Just as an aside, I've known Judge Moore for 24 years. When these allegations came out within the last week, it was incredibly painful for him, for his wife, his mom, his daughter, grandchildren. You know, in these types of cases, there's always someone who's alleging and the other person. And in those cases, when it's true, it's horrible for the person making the allegations. But when the allegations are made and it's not true, it's also horrible for the person who those allegations are directed against. It was back in 2000 that Judge Moore asked me to be his campaign manager, campaign chairman, and it was one of the greatest honors and remains today and always will be one of the greatest honors of my life. During that time and afterwards, he asked me to be his attorney, and I was one of the attorneys that represented him in the Ten Commandments case. And as you know, there have been some other cases over the last 20 years. And I've traveled with Judge Moore all over the state, different states across the nation. I've been with him in probably over 100 different meetings and been around probably in excess of 10,000 different ladies in Judge Moore's presence. And not once, not one time, have I ever seen him act even remotely inappropriate against any woman, toward any woman. Not when they were walking away, not when he and I were in private afterwards. That's the man that I know and that I've known for the last 24 years. Now, the allegations that have come out, I hope you understand it takes time to work through this. We don't have a $20 million budget as a campaign. It takes time, and we want to be correct. We want to make sure that when we say something, it's proper, okay? So we're still working through some things, but there are some things that you need to know and that we want to make you aware of. During the press conference that Ms. Nelson and Gloria Allred had on Monday, they both said that Ms. Nelson, after the allegations, had never seen nor had any contact with Judge Moore. As it turns out, in 1999, Ms. Nelson filed a divorce action against her then-husband, Mr. Harris. Guess who that case was before? It was filed in Etowah County, and the judge assigned was Roy S. Moore, Circuit Judge of Etowah County. There was contact. Judge Moore signed an order in that case as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We've also had a handwriting expert looking at the evidence that was submitted. You may remember on Monday, Ms. Nelson and Ms. Allred, in support, really the only piece of evidence they had in addition to the allegations was a yearbook where they claimed that it had been signed. And they said very specifically, look back at what they said. Everything on that page they said was written by Judge Moore. Now, Judge Moore not only has denied everything she said before, but now flatly denies that. And he says it's not true. We have a handwriting expert, that's looking at those. But here's the problem. A handwriting expert can't look at a copy on the internet, right? They've got to look at an original. So right now, Trent Garman, our attorney, has sent a letter, or is sending a letter to Gloria Allred demanding that the yearbook be released. We'll send it to a neutral custodian who'll keep chain of custody, and our professional expert will examine it, and we'll find out, is it genuine or is it a fraud? There are a couple things also that you need to know. I'm not going to go into everything that's on that paper because, again, we need to have our handwriting expert draw some conclusions. I'm not going to draw them today, and I'm not going to make any allegations that we can't support with an expert. There are a couple things that you need to look at. Look at the 1977 after Merry Christmas. Look at those two sevens. And then look below at the 77. And I want to ask you, do you think it was written by the same person? I want you to look at Old Hickory House, which they say Judge Moore wrote. Judge Moore says there's no way in the world that's his handwriting. And I want you to look at it. Look at some other writing of his and make your own determination. That's what our expert will be doing. But for now, I'm asking you all to take a look. Use your judgment. And then finally, after Judge Moore's signature, it has the initials capital D period, A period. Remember I told you about that 99 divorce action. Judge Moore looked at that DA after his signature, which they allege was because he was the district attorney. Well, he wasn't. He was the assistant district attorney. But Judge Moore says he can't ever remember ever signing his name with DA after it, but he had seen it before. You know where he had seen it? When he was on the bench, his assistant, whose initials are capital D period, A period, Delbert Adams, would stamp his signature on documents and then put capital D period, A period. That's exactly how the signature appears on the divorce decree that Judge Moore signed, dismissing the divorce action with Ms. Nelson. Knowing these things, I've got a question, Gloria Allred and Ms. Nelson. Do you still hold that everything written in that yearbook was written by Judge Moore, or was it written by somebody else? That's not an allegation, it's a question. And finally, we demand that you immediately release the yearbook to a neutral custodian so that our expert, you can send your expert as well if you'd like to, so that our expert can look at it, not a copy on the internet, the actual document, so that we can see the lettering, we can see the ink on the page, we can see the indentations, and we can see how old is that ink. Is it 40 years old or is it a week old? Release the yearbook so that we can determine, is it genuine or is it a fraud? Thank you very much.
Mr. Jareggi, what do you say to the as?
I have some information.
That accuser, does he remember her?
Mr. Jareggi, didn't Mr. Moore say that he knew her? Didn't he say that? Didn't he say that, sir?
Copies of it was shown by Mrs. Allred, and I'll just let you all pass them out if that's okay. And also what we have here is the copy of the divorce papers, not the entire thing. We show the cover page, and then what's so important is we show the final page, which has Judge Moore's signature on it with the DA. You see, we have the Roy Moore signature here, and the DA, which was added by his assistant, the same DA initials that are written on the yearbook.
Bill, does Judge Moore plan to testify under oath like Ms. Allred?
And I'll be glad to start these on this side. And since this is a legal matter, the legal expert has spoken.
Didn't Judge Moore say that he had never met her?
Thank you very much.
Why is anyone answering any questions?
Later time, sir?
All right, so there you hear the charge from Roy Moore's attorney, Philip Jareggi, suggesting that autograph inside the yearbook of that woman may not necessarily be authentic, could be a fraud. David Chalian, you listened very closely to what the attorney, Philip Jareggi, had to say. I want to go through our panel, get some analysis. Very serious charges. He wants the yearbook because he says that Roy Moore never signed that yearbook.
Right. They clearly, let's do the big headline out of that, which is not backing down. Doubling down, Roy Moore staying in this race. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that you got to take away from that, Wolf. But they are clearly focused on this yearbook. Let's talk about some things, though, that the lawyer brought up that don't make a lot of sense. He is asserting that Gloria Allred and her client were not telling the truth, that there was no contact with Roy Moore after the incident she describes. And they said, no, he was the judge assigned to her divorce case in 1999. Well, Roy Moore said he doesn't even know that woman. That was his quote. I don't even know that woman, when Gloria Allred came out with her client about that press conference the other day. Well, apparently he did know it. So his own lawyer is rebutting Roy Moore's own point about his continued relationship with this woman. The other thing I want to point out is there's no mention here about the most serious allegation against Roy Moore, which is the woman who claimed when she was 14 years old that she was molested by Roy Moore. So while they may focus on a handwriting analysis of a yearbook, and we'll see if that proves to be true or not, and perhaps they'll be able to discredit this woman's claims, what is not happening is a complete refutation right now of all of the allegations, including the most serious one against Roy Moore.
They're clearly, Mark Preston, going after Gloria Allred and her client, suggesting this is phony.
Right, and Gloria Allred is certainly somebody who's not going to play very well down in Alabama. When this first came out, we saw what happened. They did not go after the victim, they went after the lawyer because she has seen somebody who is very liberal, somebody who should not be coming into Alabama to be telling them what they should be doing. You know what? They should get the yearbook. Let them do the handwriting analysis. But as David points out, this is very, very, very weak claims right now to hang everything on. It's amazing that they would hold this news conference.
Let me get Jeffrey Toobin into this. Jeffrey, you're the lawyer here, so you see these serious charges made by the attorney representing Roy Moore and the leader of the Republican Party there in Alabama. Go ahead.
Yes, unusual forensic analysis for a Senate race here. There were two claims in this bizarre press conference. The first was there was some subsequent contact between the woman, Gloria Allred's client, and the judge. But what I didn't hear from the lawyer was there some animosity there? Did Judge Moore rule against this woman? Does she have some axe to grind against him? That was not said. So even if it's true that he was was the judge in the divorce, as far as I can tell, the only appropriate response is, so what?
Well, Jeffrey, I think the point they were making was connecting to the yearbook, because it was when he was the judge of that case that they're claiming, it seems, that his assistant DA, the initials, signed the name. I think that's why they brought up the 99 case.
Right. I mean, but the yearbook is only part of the evidence in the case. The evidence is what she says. I mean, the fact that he's questioning the yearbook it just seems like only part of the case. Now, I just think people ought to know about handwriting analysis. Now, handwriting analysis is sort of a forensic science. It is not DNA evidence. The handwriting analysis is often admissible in court, not always admissible in court, but it is not considered the gold standard of forensic science by any means. So if some handwriting analyst comes in and says, well, that handwriting doesn't seem like Judge Moore's, that's not dispositive. And handwriting analysis is a pretty questionable forensic science, and even if they get the yearbook and they find an analyst who says, well, I don't think it's Judge Moore, I don't think that would settle the question at all.
But the key here, Wolf, I think, is that none of this has to pass any sort of legal muster. All of the facts or accusations that Roy Moore's lawyer just laid out are for political purposes, purely to plant a seed of doubt in voters' minds that maybe these women's claims are not credible, to give space for Republicans who want to vote for Roy Moore but feel uncomfortable about these allegations to say, well, maybe these were all made up after all. This is all a political exercise. This really doesn't have to pass any legal muster whatsoever.
Manu, I want to go to Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill, where there's enormous pressure from Republican leaders for Roy Moore to drop out of this race. How's this going to play up there on Capitol Hill? You're speaking to a lot of those Republicans.
It's not going to play particularly well, particularly among the leaders of the Republican Party, the Senate and House leaders, as well as most of the rank-and-file senators who have come out to say that Mr. Moore needs to drop out of the race and get out quickly. Clearly, here this was designed as part of for an audience of one. President Trump. President Trump himself has not yet, of course, called on Moore to drop out of the race. And I am told by a source close to the president that he's unlikely going to call on Moore to drop out of the race. Instead, called these matters very serious and say that the Alabama voters need to decide. And that presumably, however, Wolf, could change if more pressure builds, if more accusers come out, and if the Moore team continues to be flat-footed in its response. So this response today to push back at least on one of the accusers is designed to at least prevent President Trump from coming out and trying to push Moore out of the race, but it's not going to satisfy Republicans on Capitol Hill, Wolf, who desperately want him to step aside, are calling on Trump to get more involved or getting agitated that Trump is not pushing Moore out, because if he's still in the race, they're pretty much their hands are tied, Wolf, with really no good options on how to proceed, and may have to decide on trying to expel him if he does become a senator at the end of the day, Wolf.
The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants him out. The House Speaker Paul Ryan wants him out. Let's go to the White House. Once again, Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, what are you hearing? Why is the president remaining silent on this sensitive issue?
Wolf, he definitely is watching all of these developments again, because as Manu and everyone has been reporting, the control of the Senate is influenced by this. But I am told by a person close to the White House who's been involved in conversations here throughout the day, the president, I'm told, is reluctant to weigh in on this because he does not want the conversation to become about his past accusers as well. We all watched during the presidential campaign, of course, several women from his past have filed lawsuits against him, other matters, and he is not eager to have those discussed again. So one Republican, and this again is a Republican person close to this White House, a supporter of this president, says that is one of the reasons that President Trump is not eager to weigh in. Again, not saying he will not at some point, because he does believe this is bad for the brand of the party. He does believe, of course, it's bad for the potential control of the Senate, but he is reluctant to weigh in as well. And a bigger question here hanging over this is whether the president will decide to weigh in and have his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, be named as a write-in candidate. Several Republicans up on Capitol Hill have discussed that as a possible scenario here. People close to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, say he is not eager to return to the U.S. Senate. But of course, that would be a good sort of off-ramp, if you will, for his rocky relations with this president. But I'm told right now that is a scenario that is simply that, just a scenario, one of many possible discussions. It's not gone much further than that. But this is something that the president deeply involved in, even though he's been absolutely silent on this publicly today, Wolf.
Yep, he certainly has. We'll see if that continues. You know, David Chalian, it's interesting that the audience for this statement by Philip Jareggi, the attorney representing Roy Moore, clearly the president of the United States, trying to raise some doubts there about whether or not Roy Moore was engaged in improper sexual activity with these young girls. But also, it's interesting that last night Sean Hannity on Fox, he said you have 24 hours to come up with an explanation. Now, within the 24 hours, the attorney representing Roy Moore has come up with at least something that they regard as raising doubts.
Right. So as Roy Moore looks around and sees different pieces of the Republican Party splinter away from him, he's less concerned about Mitch McConnell pounding his chest and saying, get out. Mitch McConnell is the name he made toxic to great success in his primary run against Luther Strange. So what does fear him a little bit is if there are cracks in that Fox News base and the Breitbart Bannon base, where we're getting word that Bannon is sticking with him. So yes, maybe part of this, as Rebecca was saying, it clearly was all designed for political purposes, but part of this may be to respond to that 24-hour deadline that Sean Hannity put on this.
And this is occurring within that 24-hour deadline. We'll see how he reacts and the others react as well. Everybody stand by.